recently reported WWE superstar John Cena was quoted saying that the UFC was not for him because he is a storyteller. And it sparks up the ongoing debate between UFC and WWE. There are a few connections, as Brock Lesnar, who was a championship college wrestler, went straight to the WWE, and then in the middle of his career decided to go to MMA, went to the UFC, and won a championship. There are a few other wrestlers out there that made that transition. There's Bobby Lashley, who is in Bellator right now. There's a couple guys. CM Punk, who was in the WWE, now decides he wants to be a part of the UFC at a very old age, and is a risky jump, and we'll see how that goes. But there's an ongoing, stigma between WWE fans and UFC fans. A lot of the times there aren't both. There aren't people that play both sides. I am one of them. I am a UFC fan. I am a WWE fan. Why am I a WWE fan? Because I have been since I was a child, very small, and I didn't really see much of a need to say, oh, I'm too old for this. Because I know what it is. I don't live in a fantasy land, and I still happen to enjoy it. Why am I a UFC fan? I used to box when I was younger, and I am a huge fan of the mixed martial arts. I love the training that goes into just one fight. I think that really tells a lot, and especially in the UFC when they're fighters who train so hard for weeks and weeks and weeks and go and bust their ass when the bell goes off, and they get paid very little, especially with the infamous Reebok deal that happened, which allows the fighters to not have sponsors and get that sponsor money. I have two animals in this room that are just going nuts. I have a guinea pig that is going nuts on his water, and I have a dog that's sniffing under the door. Stop it. Hey, quit that. Anyways, that's what I was saying. It's not needed. It's not needed, but it's interesting to talk about. You have a UFC fighter who wants to be a wrestler. You have a WWE wrestler who wants to be a UFC fighter. So, which one would have more success? And there are a couple things here. I think age is huge, because when you talk about success, are you talking about winning a fight? Are you talking about winning a wrestling match? I think age goes into it, because I think a UFC fighter that wants to be a wrestler, there's a lot you have to work for. Obviously, it's not just going in there and fighting. You have to have some type of charisma. You have to have some type of something that gets a pop from the fans. Fans have to like you, or they have to really hate you. And if they're going to hate you, they have to hate you personally. They can't just be like, oh, this guy sucks so bad, I hate him. Yeah, you don't want that kind of hate. But as we saw with, wrestlers like Triple H, Ric Flair, the list goes on. You can really do it for a while. And you could definitely do it longer than you can in the UFC, I feel. Because in the WWE, they use you accordingly, and they try to make sure you don't snap your back. And in the UFC, you're fighting. You're out there really taking punches every fight. You can't hide that unless you're super duper duper Floyd Mayweather defense, But if I'm putting money on this, I would say a relatively young, mid-20s WWE wrestler would have more success in the UFC than a UFC mid-20s wrestler would have in the WWE. And I know that's an unpopular statement, but let's look at things here. Okay, I'll put it this way. A lot of people are naturally good fighters. And I'm not gonna say everybody, because obviously that'd be idiotic. But there are quite a few people who are gifted fighting. Rather, maybe you grew up in the wrong neighborhood and you had to do it a lot, or maybe you just don't care about the damage that goes on your body and you just go out there and just swing like crazy. There's a lot of people who are gifted fighters. And in the UFC, it just takes one punch a lot of the times. Just takes one punch. Or one wrong move to where you have somebody's forearm wrapped around your neck. And I would take a mid-20s WWE wrestler and six weeks in a intensified UFC training camp over a UFC fighter 6 weeks in a WWE camp to do what WWE wrestlers do. I would put my money on the wrestler in the UFC. Because there are a lot of things that go into being a UFC fighter. Of course, you have to have stamina, which I think WWE wrestlers would have, because they're running around all over the place more than a UFC fighter does. So the stamina's there. The punching and the kicking, I think that you can get a good idea 6 weeks in a training camp. You really can. And that's what you have to do. And of course you have to have an understanding of the fight, which naturally, talking to the right people could help you. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's going to be a champion in this time. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying who would have more success in the fields. And if a UFC fighter comes to the WWE and he gets 6 weeks of training, he has to learn how to communicate during the match. He has to learn how to take punches, throw punches right, throw kicks, take kicks right. It's not only what you do, it's how you receive it as well. He has to take slams, and he has to learn how to talk on the microphone and be charismatic to the fans. That's a lot to take down, believe it or not. And I know people aren't really going to like this, but it's the reality of the situation, So that's the question there. That's the question you answer. You ask yourself, would a WWE wrestler, and I'm putting the age limit mid-20s, a mid-20s WWE wrestler goes to the UFC, trains for 6 weeks, and then a UFC fighter mid-20s goes through 6 weeks at a WWE training camp and has to put on a match and maybe cut a little promo to show his microphone skills? Who would have more success? Who would be more liked? And to the fans, this deal isn't going on. You don't know this guy was in the WWE. You don't know this guy was in the UFC. They're just two random guys. Who would have more success?